Hi, this is Ruth Brunner. I have the pleasure today of interviewing Ed Starck, and it is August 16th, 2021, and we're here at Ed Starck's and his wife Joanne's home. So Ed, would you state your full name, any nicknames you had, or your place of birth, and those vital informations before we start questions, okay?
Okay, my name's Edward Raymond Starck. I was born July 12th, 1943, here in Windsor at what was known as the Bart's Memorial Hospital, which is about a half a block south of the intersection of 7th and Main. So that's where I was born, and I've lived here in Windsor, not counting military service in college, all but 2 years. I spent 2 years, Joanne and I lived in Iowa for 2 years. I taught school there, and then we came back here in 1972. So that's kind of where I'm at. Nicknames, you know, a lot of times classmates and people around Windsor had nicknames. I was just known as Ed. I don't think I was ever bestowed a nickname, so it's Ed Starck.
Ed Starck. Okay. So who were your parents and
My
siblings?
parents were Theodore and Emma Starck. My dad, Ted, who's known as Ted, was born in Alexandrov, Russia. So we're part of the Russian-German heritage in the area. My mother was born in Grand Island, Nebraska, and you know, they basically were beat laborers, you know, field workers, and that was basically their life when they were young. They eventually worked out of the, I guess you'd say, the beet fields. My dad became a blacksmith. My mother was a homemaker. You know, in those days, women's full-time job was being mother, and my mom did that very well. Had 6 boys.
Wow.
I don't know how she kept track of all of us, but you know, she did a good job.
Okay, so so when did your family come to this area? Did your mom come from Grand Island here, or?
Well, my father was in the Berthoud area. That's where a lot of the Starcks grew up, and my mother was kind of raised in Loveland. You know, they worked in the Johnstown area quite a bit, you know, during the summer, you know, when the beet season was going. But I think, you know, around 1935 to 37, I'm not sure of the year, you know, they moved to Windsor, and my dad opened a blacksmith shop here. He had been tutored and trained by a guy by the name of Fred Pinkerton, who was, and I did meet Fred and knew him and his wife, and he really taught my dad the blacksmith trade. And Dad had a shop here downtown Windsor. It was next door to the Foster Chevrolet garage, right behind Bethel Lutheran Church. So in 1956, or I think it was about 1956, Dad got kind of tired of the blacksmith business, and lo and behold, he goes to work for a guy by the name of Fred Pinkerton, same guy. And Fred was a home builder in the Fort Collins area, and my dad worked for him for a number of years and learned the carpentry and builder skills, and then eventually became in a building business with his brother. So it was Starck Brothers Construction, and I think Dad finally retired in about 1969 or 70, somewhere in there.
Okay, wow. So what kinds of things did he weld and do? I mean, did he quit that because welding wasn't as needed, or did he weld?
Well, he did a lot of welding, but he did a lot of forge work. He had 2 coal-fired forges. That's where you heat the steel. Had 2 anvils, 1 for each forge. And he also had what they call a trip hammer. And I can remember the brand on the trip hammer because it was about probably 7 foot tall, and it was probably weighed 1 or 2 tons, but they were really heavily built, and the brand name was called Little Giant. And I've seen those recently in museums in Oklahoma when we were down there. But you could always hear the blacksmith shop in business because the trip hammers, they work real rapid, and it's like a big sledgehammer hitting another block of steel, and you put your workpiece in between those, and you step on this switch on the floor, and it operates the trip hammer, and you could hear from one end of Main Street, just bang, 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 bang. Wow. The blacksmiths, and there was one other one down the street, were busy sharpening bean knives or plow lathes or whatever it was. But Dad also made what they call beat boxes. It was when you bought a new truck, it just had the chassis, the cab and the chassis, and then the farmers would go to somebody that would build a box on the back, and they had to be built a certain way so that the farmers could dump the beets and load the beets and also dump the beets. And I've still seen a few of them in the area. They're kind of in extreme disrepair and falling apart, but we did find one over near Johnstown about a year or two ago. It's in a big nursery, and they kind of have it as a centerpiece in front of their place of business. So they did a lot of things. Dad did welding and built beat boxes, did a lot of forge work. He also had a huge lathe where he could turn shafts and things that were need to be turned out to specific tolerances. So he was kind of an all-around metalworking man.
Did you help him at his workplace, or did you learn any chores or trades of watching him? Or
we had to go down and help keep the blacksmith shop clean, and we didn't really like that too much, because blacksmith shops are always dirty. I mean, even after you clean it, you still get black when you touch stuff. So we did help Dad with the keeping the blacksmith shop clean. The oldest brother, Kenneth, he wound up being the bookkeeper. In those days, people would come in and have work done, and of course, Dad would write it on a slip, and then Kenneth would enter it into a journal. And it wasn't really very sophisticated or necessarily a good way to keep track of your accounts, because sometimes Dad would forget, during the day what he did, like we all do. But he would also probably keep two of the other brothers pretty busy. My second oldest brother, Howard, and Ted, Dad put them to work on helping build the beat boxes. So we all kind of had different parts of the blacksmith shop, but we also got to experiment with, Dad's equipment. Some of it was actually pretty dangerous, unprotected V-belts, on huge grinders. But believe it or not, all 6 boys got out with 10 fingers and 2 eyes. So
that's great.
It was a good experience for all of us.
All right. So, did you ever play pranks on your brothers?
Oh, I don't know. No, not really too much. We just, I don't know,
On your schoolmates?
The prankster type brothers, I guess.
You weren't all working that. What do you remember most about the town of Windsor when you were growing up?
I think what I remember most was the size of the town, 1,500 to 1,600 people. And of course, everybody knew who their kids were, where they lived. And it was truly, a village that raised the kids, because we were really pretty, what they call today, I guess, free-ranging kids. We had a run of the town. The lake was one of our favorite places. We would build boats, and actually, big enough for 2 people to get in. And some worked, and some were real failures that flip over easy. We spent a lot of time around the lake and down on the Poudre River and the bluffs, what we call the bluffs, southeast of town. So we just had kind of a run of the town. Farmers didn't care if you would across their ground to get to a good spot in the river. So it was a good community to grow up in.
Was it the bluffs where Doc Saban and some of the guys put out a golf course in the cow?
It was close. Yeah, the golf course. I remember the golf course very well because one of my classmates, by the name of Bruno Bechtold, got involved with what they call sweeping the greens, and basically, instead of having a nice grass area to play on, it was dry land ground, and for the greens where the cup was, where you wanted to wind up getting the ball in, were sand. And so Bruno and I would go up there, and we had I think it was like a railroad tie, and had ropes attached to it, and would drag it around the greens in a circle, and to make it a real nice sand surface. And that's what the golfers liked. If it was full of ruts and everything, it just wouldn't work for a green. So we went up and kept the greens in playing condition.
Yeah, and what is there now? It's kind of on those boats.
What's there now is it's just returned to dry land. I don't think there's any farming on it. It's just sagebrush and grass. But also up there, very close to that, was what we call the town dump. That's where people took all their trash, and it was a big gully, and everything was pushed, or placed, along the edge of the gully, and it would work itself back, further and further, and then the town would go up with I can't remember if it was a tractor or what, and they would push all of the dropped materials into the gully, and that went on for years. Eventually, through government regulations on landfills and everything, that came to an end. So I was up there a few years ago. I still know where it's at, but it's all covered over now with it. You wouldn't even know that it was a dump at one time.
Yeah. So it's the coordinates of roads closest to it is kind of Crossroads and 280.
Well, probably 257 and Crossroads. That is really, if you continue south on that, right, you cross a bridge, and if you, rather than making a turn to the east, there used to be a road that went straight south, and that would take you up to the golf course and the city dump.
Wow.
So, it's all still there, and in fact, I could find, I was up there with my kids a few years, well, probably 30 years ago, and we could still find some of the greens that we used to drag to keep them smooth. Yeah.
So it's on the west side of 257.
Correct.
Right? Correct.
Yes.
So that people
yes.
would know. All right. That's very interesting. What changes have you seen in Windsor?
Well, when we grew up, as I said, it was about 1,600 people, and then in 1969, Eastman Kodak came, and that was a really, really big deal. And right away, they thought the town would jump to 20,000 in population, within a couple of years. The telephone company, for example, came over and bought up a half a city block of houses that they would, expand their current telephone building into that area. Well, that never happened for a variety of reasons. One, the telephone equipment became a lot smaller and needed less space. So they have added on to the telephone building, but not nearly to the extent that they thought they would. And they have since sold that half a block off. But anyway, when...
and that block was like 4th Street to Elm, and then
yes.
down towards 5th. It was kind
yes.
of where the CenturyLink office is,
right.
off the alley on 4th Street.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Once that happened, Kodak, I think Windsor jumped to about 5,000 rather than 20,000 like they thought. Windsor just kind of remained there until, I would say, in the 1990s. And I remember I was coming home from work. Our office was downtown, and I was on Main Street and couldn't make a left turn at 7th and Main because there was so many cars. And I thought, what's going on in town? It's just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
What's all these cars doing here? And finally I came to the realization Windsor was just expanding that much, and it was impacting the traffic. So that's really when Windsor, kind of jolted itself. I think we went from 5,000 to today we're getting close to 40,000, not quite, but it certainly has changed the whole character of Windsor.
Yeah, the old character of Windsor. Now, you own a building in downtown Windsor.
Yes.
And you remember did you own it when Kodak came in and they wanted to put the German fronts on it to make it look like a Bavarian village, or?
No, I didn't own, in fact, I was just finishing college at UNC,
Okay.
and I moved to Iowa for 2 years, and that's when I think the downtown business people wanted to put a fresh look on Main Street, and they came in with the old world motif, and their intentions were certainly good, but I think in the long term, they kind of destroyed a lot of the old facades on the buildings. The First National Bank downtown, for example, had a beautiful old-looking bank appearance. Well, they didn't just cover it. They stripped the old brick facade off. It's gone. And then relayed this more modernistic front on it. And, I think that was a mistake because the character of the town was either destroyed or it was covered over. The building that Joanne and I currently own, where the Chamber of Commerce resides, we recently found some pictures of the front of that building. That was, when I was a kid, that was Olson's clothing store. Later it became Ehrlich's clothing store. And we believe all the old facade is behind the one that was put on in the 1970s. So we're working with the DDA, and there's some grant money available. We're looking at stripping that facade off and exposing the original facade, which had some really pretty nice decorative brickwork, and I just think it would, I think the facade that's on there now really looks nice, but I would rather have it more of the original facade.
Original. It's 421 Main Street?
Correct.
Yes. Okay, so you also went into the military. When did you meet Joanne?
Well, I met Joanne probably before I really realized it. I used to go down to Dad's blacksmith shop, and it was a good place for us to play and experiment with things. Well, these farmers would come in, and I'm sure Joanne came in with her dad occasionally to either bring plow lathes in or have something welded. So, but I never really paid that much attention to girls, and but eventually, I think at church is where I probably really noticed her, and I was what they call a cradle robber, because I was, I guess, probably 16, and she was probably 12 about that time, but that was okay. And anyway, Joanne her mother thought she was too young to date, so I could go out and see her on Saturday, or mostly Sunday afternoons, and play records and do things like that. And probably our first daytime date, was Labor Day of 1960. We spent the day together.
You were how old?
I was 17, so Joanne would have been 13.
Wow, you just grew up as friends then.
Yeah, really, yeah. But, as I said, she caught my eye, and just never could shake that. But I went to the Navy in May of 1961. I got out of high school on Friday night, or I got graduated on Friday night. Monday morning, I was in San Diego, California, in boot camp. So we wrote to each other for, a little over 3.5 years. I was on what they call a kiddie cruise. If you join before your 18th birthday, you're discharged the day before you're 21. So you could actually do your military service obligation in a little over 3 years, and that's what I did. So I think probably I The last time I came home on leave was Christmas of 1962, and we just became closer. And I finished my military service in July of '64, and we dated after I came home, and then right around graduation time in 1965, we became engaged. And then we were married in November of 1965.
Nice. And you have 3 daughters.
3 daughters, yes. And I come from a family of 6 boys, so different home environment experience for me, that's for sure.
We'll have to get Joanne to come in and get a picture with us in the film if she's willing to. But the next thing I was going to ask you about, I know you served as mayor of Windsor.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what years did you serve as mayor of Windsor?
I served 2000, well, just before that I finished a term of somebody that left the town, and I served as a town board member for about 1 year, and that was 2003. I ran and was elected in 2004 through 2008. Those were the years that I served as mayor.
Well, what were some of the things that, didn't you work on getting a truck bypass?
We
talked about that. What were some of the issues? I mean, that hasn't happened yet here in 2021.
Yeah, the big truck bypass, I mean, that had been studied probably a dozen times. I don't know, but there has been numerous studies on that. And just due to the geography of Windsor, it just was never really feasible. CDOT at the time had zero money to build a bypass, and even if they did, it would have impacted a lot of other, little subdivisions had been built out in the county areas. It would have been a very difficult task to build a bypass, and you were talking, tens of millions of dollars to be able to do that, and CDOT just didn't have any money to do that. So we could study it to death, and you could still study it today, but I'm not sure there's any easy solutions for Windsor. The other big issues were, the biggest one probably was a Walmart rezoning issue, and I remember that very well. And I remember there was a group of people that were really opposed to it, and the group did eventually get it on the ballot to get the people to vote on it. And I remember sitting in the town hall when the results for the election came in, and the vote to deny Walmart rezoning by the voters was no, was 1,100 votes, and yes to allow them to rezone was 1,103 votes. So 3 votes.
3 votes difference.
Yes. And then the group tried another approach. They said, okay, you're going to allow Walmart, but let's put a petition in that would not allow any store over, I think, like 50 or 60,000 square feet, which would basically make it unfeasible for any big box store to come to Windsor. And that the town really turned that down because of the tax implications. And I remember working with Walmart, after these votes, and they finally just said, we just, don't really care anymore. We're going to build a store probably in Timnath, which they did. Mm-hmm. And when that happened, there were some other big box stores that had looked at Windsor and just said, nah, we're not interested. So I think it was a huge mistake financially for Windsor to allow Walmart to be chased off, basically. It's kind of funny, you look at a little town like Johnstown and Timnath, who have some really pretty sizable sales tax generators, I guess you would call them. Johnstown has the Centera, it's across from Centera. I think it's called the 3425 exchange area. They've got Shields. I mean, they've got a huge amount of stores. And then, of course, Timnath has not only Walmart but also Costco. Those generate tremendous sums of money. Windsor's still okay. I mean, but just because you're okay doesn't mean you couldn't have been a lot better. It would have provided financial support for a lot of other, what I want to say, enhancements to our town. So anyway, that's history. Windsor's still a great place, but I think we kind of missed the boat on that.
That is true. So as the mayor, I want to just thank you for your service.
Okay, well,
because that's a hard position to do, and that. So before we come on, we have Joanne come over. We'll meet her too.
Okay.
Is there anything that that are important for you that you want to talk about that I didn't ask?
Well, I just think that I'm not involved in politics or town government or the school entity. I did serve 12 and a half years as a member of the RI4 Board of Education.
Wow.
2.5 years as president, and I see a lot of so-called Weld, meaning groups of people that want to, what I want to say, put their desires or their perspectives in place, which would affect the education of kids, of how the town grows, and I think those can be very dangerous. Undue influence by small, well, not necessarily small, but by groups of people are just trying to promote their own interests and not worry about the bigger picture of the town or the school district. And I see that happening, and it certainly will be unfortunate if you allow that type of overpowering influence upon those elected officials, because they don't have an easy job.
No, they don't. And we thank you again for your service. So what event in your life do you think has had the most influence on you beside your family or the things we've mentioned?
I think there's a lot of things. Joy and I have 3 girls, and they've, I guess it's the real satisfaction to sit back and see that they've gone down the good path of life and contribute to others and their community, and that they've turned out really good, and they're supportive of us in there's a lot of things I can't do anymore physically, and they're there for us. So that's one of the big things. I look at I served the RI4 Board of Education for 12 and a half years, and I really learned a lot, because when I was first elected, they sent us basically to school in Denver. The Colorado Association of School Boards held for newly elected board members. I think it was a 3-day conference work session in the Denver area. Gee, I just really learned a lot, and throughout the year at conventions and conferences, they provide a lot of education, and looking back, I learned a lot, but there's a lot of things I would have done different, because as you get older, you become a little wiser of what you should do and shouldn't do. But it was really a great support for me, was the Colorado Association of School Boards, and my wife, because we went through some times in 1979 when we built this house. The interest rate, and that was the standard rate for a home mortgage, was 10%, approximately 10. By the time we got this house done, it was 19%. And we didn't want to borrow very much money, maybe 20% of its value. I couldn't qualify for a loan. And we struggled a long time. And a friend of mine who was the local banker, a guy by the name of Lee House, he found some money for me at, believe it or not, 12.75%, and it was a godsend. It saved us from not being able to pay our construction loan off and stay here. So Lee was really a good friend and helped me out when I needed one.
Well, you've been a good friend to our community too, Ed.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for the time and interviewing you today. It was delightful.
Okay.